Hey everyone, welcome to this presentation. We're going to be having a look at creating our own digital matte paintings in Photoshop. And while it is quite an exciting process, it is important to start considering where we begin with matte paintings and exactly what their origins are and where they're going from here. Now, at this point, there's a lot of documentaries out on the beginning of matte painting, so I don't want to get too far into that and really do want to jump into the process, but there are some things we need to think about. So up on screen at the moment is what we have is a matte painting from Indiana Jones, and this is the Raiders of the Lost Ark. This is one of the final shots of the film, and in this shot here we actually have a little bit of live action, but the rest of this warehouse, boxes and all the rest, is actually meticulously hand painted. So no digital painting at this point when this was created. So very effective there, and was able to create a very effective matte painting and set extension. And here we have a matte painter working on one of the original Star Wars films, and as you can see, meticulously hand painting in sections. Areas of the image have been left blank, and video projection from live studio sets was placed, and a very complex process indeed. Now fortunately for us, it is a lot easier nowadays, and we can use photo manipulation along with painting techniques if required, but most of it's photo, video, and quite often 3D. And here we've got another example some of you may be familiar with more recently, and this is actually from The Walking Dead, and this is one of the famous shots here. Now this is not the final matte painting. There's sections in here which are being used, and we can actually use video in our matte paintings. I do want to suggest that using video for your matte paintings is very effective because it allows for a little bit of motion, and it creates much more effective use. However, it can be a little bit tricky getting everything to align to your cameras and wiring things like warp stabilization and also color grading, get everything to match in. So if you want to keep it nice and simple, I'd suggest keeping a still plate, so using just photography and photo elements. However, if you do feel the need to include a video asset, please do ask about that and just see if what the requirements are to make sure that's going to work for you. But if we go to the next plate, here we can see that this is sort of a little bit closer to the final image here. We've got wrecked trains, we've got cars all crashed on the side, and we've got a city in the background, and quite different than the starting plate. So very exciting for that. And really with matte paintings, there's so much we can create and create some very exciting stuff for us to be able to place into our films or our TV series or games. While we're looking at these sort of things, I really do want to bring up some of the issues that we may run into when selecting our images. So let's have a quick look at some of the problems here. Now a lot of these are actually photos that I have taken, and I want to address some issues when choosing your matte plate image to start with. Now this image here has got some quite beautiful colors in here, but it is actually missing a lot of detail. We can't see much detail in the buildings, and this overarching sunset is creating a lot of reds and orange hues and purples coming through. And what that means for us is when we go to add other assets to this, we need to really create a very strong color correction to any other assets that are imported. So in this sense, it's despite being quite a nice looking image, it really doesn't give it much to start with, and it could be a nice thing to put a final grade on a matte painting once it's finished, but as a starting point, this really isn't that good. This image here is just way too blurry. Can't actually see what it is, so obviously no good. And likewise goes if your image is too pixelated or too small to fit your requirements, then you may need to get rid of it. black and white. Um, Try and avoid black and white for your starting point, and particularly also for bringing in assets in black and white. Black and white photography looks fantastic. It's got a great mood. It's got a great atmosphere, but adding color to black and white itself is extremely difficult to get right, and it's a very multi-step process to get a black and white image looking effectively as a color image. It's much easier doing it the other way around if need be. So do try and avoid black and white. Fisheye. Um, Fisheye lenses can be quite popular, and also later on we look at stitching images if required. This can be a bit of an issue. If we are trying to do a realistic view from the perspective of someone looking at an environment, we don't actually see the world in a fisheye situation. There might be a circumstance where you do need to apply that for a film thing, but in most cases, if your image is fisheye, it's just not going to look right as a matte painting. It's going to look very weird indeed. So you could try and straighten this out using some techniques, but do try and avoid fisheye. This image here, very unfortunate for this one. I do really like this one. This was taken in Angkor Wat, and great image, but big lights sort of bursting through. We've got some light breaks, we've got some lens flares, and it's just pushed out this image. And unfortunately, trying to repair something like this beam of light cutting across here is going to be really hard to do, and also integrating other images is also going to be a big issue. So I might be able to get a few assets out of this, but realistically this is going to be quite a challenge, and what's going to be one of our big things that we look at. How much time do we actually have to fix up an asset? This one here, likewise, it was just too dark for the camera to pick up enough detail, and also a lot of light bleed in there, and just too dark as well. This one here is an interesting one. I do actually really like this image. There's a couple of people in here and a few other things that I might want to get rid of. They're easy to get rid of. That's not an issue at all. The issue for here potentially is the perspective. Now, whilst that isn't a major thing in some cases, it can be in a sense of if we are trying to find assets either online or take our own photos, we need to consider, are the assets that we're going to be bringing in going to match the perspective of our starting matte plate? The answer is yes, and if you're willing to search out these images and do some correct distortions and stuff, then fantastic. The answer is no, or you start finding that your assets aren't going to be suitable that you're finding, then you might need to reconsider that, or even once again see if you can adjust the perspective on this. But I do like a good challenge, and I think this would be a really nice starting image to look at. It's it's nice, it's clean, it's got a nice clean blue sky, which is going to be fantastic for getting rid of, for cutting out. There's not too many assets in the way that I want to get rid of. These characters, as I mentioned, are very easy to do, and there's a lot of potential on this. The shadows aren't too harsh in most of the areas, and there's a lot of things we can do as a set extension. This one here, unfortunately, we've got the light coming behind. It's just creating a big silhouette of the image here, and it's just killing all the detail, so it really isn't giving us much to play with here. There is some stuff we can do this. If your matte painting is intended to be like that, you might be able to bring other assets in, but it's going to be very hard to bring the details back from this. It's easier to create something, to lose the details or create something darker than it is to make something lighter, unfortunately. This one here, again, it's a little bit washed out, but we can do some color correction. But do take into consider, little things like people, vehicles, anything that's going to get in the way as far as things you might want to get rid of. Remember, when we are creating a digital matte painting, having people in your shot, if it's going to be on screen for any number of seconds, if your characters aren't moving, it's going to look like a photo and not like a matte painting. So the idea of a matte is that it's saying, here's my environment, it's an establishing shot, but if everyone's standing static, unless that's what they're supposed to be doing, it's going to look like a photo. What we want to do is potentially add characters afterwards, or a little bit of movement afterwards, either using video techniques, or if you have some video footage with the characters moving, we could potentially matte them out. If there's a green screen, even better if you're able to set that up, but in most cases I would consider removing any characters cars that are supposed to be driving or moving. Anything with motion that's not moving, try and remove it, because it's just going to look weird if it's standing still. It's frozen in time. This one here as well, same issue. Nice door frame. It's cut off here, so it unfortunately isn't duplicated on both sides, so I might have to do a little bit of Photoshop magic if I was to have that as an entire arch. So not impossible. And also, we've got some characters in here that I may or may not want to get rid of. If they're going to be standing still, that's going to be an issue, so I'll probably need to clean these people up and get them out of the shot. Again, not impossible to do, but one of the big considerations is how much time are you willing to spend. And if this arch is only a small aspect of my matte painting, and this is going to take quite a bit of time to remove them, I might consider actually leaving it. I don't think it's going to take that long personally to fix, so this might definitely be one of the assets that I might consider using. Alright, let's step out of there and let's have a look at some other aspects. So once we've kind of got an idea of what doesn't work, what I usually suggest is either start gathering information, but the other one I usually suggest is start finding reference images and inspiration. So let's have a look here. I've just really quickly gathered some stuff that I thought was going to be suitable for my project, and these could vary. I'm going for a sort of a strange, junky, dystopian, hot situation with multi-level stuff. Find inspirational artworks that other people have done that might sort of elements from film, locations, props, anything that's going to help out your imagination and inspiration. So you've got a jumping off point to say, yes, I like that. That's kind of where I want to go. Or there's an element in that that I like. Or how did they do that? Is there an atmospheric situation that's going to be useful for me? And if you're very lucky, you may actually be able to find some stuff that's not just concept art or matte paintings that have already been created, but stuff like this where it's really just interesting buildings and stuff that may lend to it. And of course, when building matte paintings, it's not always about doing something really fancy. Sometimes it's doing something that just looks like it integrates into the environment and doesn't need to make a big noise. So start collecting images, create yourself a mood board if need be, but at least start getting some ideas and inspirations of where you want to take your image. And what I want to look at now is actually finding a location as a starting point, analyzing the image, and also creating a digital combination of these things, and by combining these assets into a single image. And what I've actually got here is a number of photos that I'm looking to align together in Photoshop to create a single starting plate. And the idea of the starting plate is this is going to be my main asset that I'm going to build from, and it's a decent resolution. I've had to take a number of photos to be able to fit this all in, and while a lot of us will have access to panorama effects on our camera, stitching a photo together can be really effective because it allows us to maintain not just a high level of detail and resolution, but it also allows us to get some height and depth as well as width when creating a panorama. Now, looking at this image before I even stitch it up, I can already see there are going to be some issues. The main issue I'm kind of looking at here is we've got a lot of shadow popping through some of the areas here. There's a few little things like weeds and dents, but that could actually be useful. There's power lines cutting through the sky, but I'm probably going to get rid of that. And there's some vehicles and stuff in the background and other little assets like that, but I'm not overly concerned with those. I'm quite happy to be able to spend a quick bit of time getting rid of those and deciding what I'm going to do with my matte painting afterwards. But it is important before we do spend time doing things like auto aligning and color correcting our plate image is having a look at your photos and saying, is this something I can use? Is there going to be an overarching issue that I need to deal with that I'm not willing to deal with? Is there going to be a perspective issue? Is there going to be a distortion issue? Is there going to be anything else that's going to be a problem? And do I need to go out and potentially take more photos, or find a new still? Now, I'm going to be using an auto align technique with a combination of these images. If you happen to find and or be able to capture the entire area that you want to capture within a single photo, fantastic. But please keep in mind that you do want to have something that's going to be of a good quality, which means good resolution, nice and clear, lots of detail, and not going to have too many people or vehicles or things in the way. And be wary of shadows and anything that's going to be an issue. It's not always insurmountable, but it's worth taking note of and seeing if you can deal with that before you have to jump into post, so to speak, and start hacking away and trying to do